Hello and welcome to episode 107 of the Clean Energy Show. I'm Brian Stockton.
And I'm internet influencer James Whittingham. This week, U.S. Senator Joe Machin is pure evil and a singular threat to the climate all by himself, according to an anger-inducing deep dive by the New York Times. Lucky for Machin that Will Smith is not an environmentalist.
Shell Oil has begun offering Tesla cars on a subscription basis. This is in addition to their Buy Our Gas and Ruin the Planet subscription service.
There are some train routes in the world, including Toronto to Vancouver in Canada, where you produce lower emissions on an airplane than if you took the train. And I created a bunch of emissions in my pants when I learned about that.
Apple has begun moving to carbon-free aluminum for their notebook computers. After Apple won Best Picture at the Oscars, Tim Cook pleaded with Will Smith and Chris Rock to make the Oscars cruelty-free.
All that and more in this exciting edition of The Clean Energy Show. How are you, Brian? You just got back from a road trip.
Yeah, I booked a Tesla service appointment, which is in the city to the north of us, 2.5-hour drive. And I talked, I think, a little bit about it last week, but they had asked for more information through the app. You booked the appointment through the app, and they said, well, can you give us a date on where this issue happened? And I was having issues where it just wasn't hot enough when in the deep, deep cold.
Yeah.
And it seemed like maybe it was just a car kind of conserving energy, or maybe it was something not working right, like a sensor.
Now, are you sure that it just was incapable of producing heat in the wind at minus 40 Celsius and Fahrenheit? I mean, really?
Yes, although, it would happen, if it was minus 22 driving around the city, it was always kind of like too chillier than it should be. So, I just wasn't sure if that was normal. So they asked for to give them a date of when this might have happened so that they could look at the logs, because everything is logged because it's an all-digital car. And they asked me also if I'd had any warnings pop up on the screen about, the heating system, and I said no. And they looked at the logs, and they said they did an over-the-air diagnostic, and everything according to what they saw there was working as normal. And then they told me to just use the air circulation feature more in the winter in the deep cold. So I'm always using fresh air because that's, you always want fresh air.
Fresh air. Just stay on the car, especially a man who likes taco time as much as you. Yeah.
So, and you have to then switch back and forth between fresh and recirculated air because the windows will fog up here where it's so cold. So, it's warming up, so I'll have to kind of wait until next winter. But I went ahead and just canceled the appointment because it sounded like there was nothing else they could do. Like they had ran the diagnostic and didn't find anything. So I don't think they would have done anything different at the appointment. But I had made plans to see a friend of ours. So I went anyway, had a nice little road trip. And I still don't have full self-driving beta, by the way. I'm hoping to maybe get it tonight. The car was not on Wi-Fi when I was out of town, so that might have something to do it. But just sort of an update about edge cases in terms of full self-driving, because on the drive back, there was weird highway snow conditions I'd never seen before. And it seemed like, this is going to be one of those confusing edge cases in terms of lane markings in a road. So I'm on autopilot. I'm on the highway, and it snowed overnight. Most of the snow is starting to melt, but it snowed overnight. And the patterns of snow on the highway were super weird. And I, had never seen something like that before. But the snow was on the highway in lines that looked like dotted road marker lines. Like
really?
Yeah, and there were several of them, and they were kind of all over the place. And, so I'm on autopilot, and I'm thinking, gee, I bet you the car is going to get confused by these patches of snow that look exactly like the lane markings. And so I kept my hands on the steering wheel quite tight. And yeah, sure enough, at one point, the car wanted to move over when it shouldn't have.
Wow.
So, for a few kilometers, I had to, drive the car myself like some kind of hobo.
That'd be me. I have to drive my car. Well, that's something I have not heard before, and it's interesting. Weird snow patterns from winds, right? It's windy.
I guess it was windy and people driving on it, but it was quite consistently like that for several kilometers. in various ways and in various patches, but it was many, many dotted lines of snow. It was weird.
Now, did you know that first of all, they've come down to worse drivers than you, the FSD beta, those who are connected overnight, the people with 98, you're at 99. Lots of people with 100, don't know why you're not there. I don't understand it, Brian, but lots of people are doing better than you. If I was a parent of yours and this was elementary school, I would be very disappointed. I would want higher achievements. But the streetcars in downtown Toronto are preventing, they're geo-locked away from FSD. So you can't, Tesla doesn't know what to do with streetcars, which seems like it would be a fairly easy thing to program in because they'd be fairly consistent once you figured out how they acted. In large. Yeah,
although I think you could probably like identify them by what they looked like and then just kind of treat them like buses. Like, because even though they're on tracks, I think if you treated it like a bus, the system would probably, buy that, I think.
Hey, we went and we bought our Prius. This has been a long thread of a story on this podcast for 2 years now. Our last lease payment went through a few days ago. And we had a few more weeks, I guess the end of the next month or something. So we bought it, wrote them a check for it, and bought it out for, I think with the fee to buy it out, $13,000, with roughly a $12,500 value, supposedly, based on what we've paid for it. And that would be how much it had a list price of about $28,000, something like that. And then you pay $1,800 for delivery and all the taxes and everything on top of that. And so, yeah, we had it for 5 years as a lease. And now I'm ready, Brian, to trade that puppy in. I found one up in Saskatoon, the city you were just talking about, for sale for a ridiculously high price. So that it was such a small market where we live that it was nice to confirm that those Priuses are selling for a fortune due to high gas prices and supply shortage of the new cars.
Yeah, so a super bargain to be able to buy it off the lease on that price, just given the way
I was scared. I was scared, that they would know better, because if that's true, they can sell it for basically what it didn't depreciate in 5 years practically. I mean, that's the list price. That's what the car dealerships with their markups and their list price are selling it for. But if I could get, $24,000 to a nice Uber or cab driver, and it's white too, so it's perfect for cab conversion. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would be able to get into a Chevy Bolt EV, perhaps, when they start making them in April and delivering them in May. And the Canadian budget is going to come down on April 7th, I think. And they're talking about maybe, there was a new environmental plan out today, so there could be a bump up or a change. I'd love to see them eliminate the federal tax on electric vehicles for a couple of years, in addition to the $5,000 rebate you get at the dealership. So, I mean, that's worth a lot, actually. $40,000 vehicle tax, 7% tax. Yeah, and Toyota, when we were there, said that it's taken 8 months to get any car in. Their lot is still empty. It's sad. We asked about the EV. They laughed and said 2 years minimum. We're not one of the main markets, but that's going to be a problem once the federal government starts mandating zero-emission vehicle mandates for the country. All the vehicles need to go to other markets that have provincial. They're going to go to the ones that have provincial programs. We don't have any provincial programs. So we're one of those countries. Oh, I tried something fast food-wise, Brian, that was interesting. It's always fun when I do that in the clean energy world. I tried I was at Tim Hortons, the ubiquitous donut and coffee restaurant in Canada, and they had a plant-based sausage patty breakfast sandwich. They're known for their breakfast sandwiches as well. They switched to fresh eggs a year or two ago, and then they've upped their game, and they're competing with McDonald's. And I really liked it. First of all, no bone. You often get chunks of bone in these damn things. It just turns me off for a year. Like once a year, I got a chunk of bone in it. But the texture and the greasy and it was very convincing, except it had a nice even texture. But yeah, it had an oily, sausagey aftertaste too. It wasn't it's kind of gross, but it wasn't artificial. I'll say that. It didn't seem that way.
And this is not like one of the brand names, like a Beyond Patty?
It is. I think it is a Beyond Meat
it is.
Sausage. Yeah, it was about an 80 cents premium for that. which is too bad. I was hoping it'd be a little less, but I would go that route all the time. I do like sausage with my fast food breakfast sandwiches. Not that I should be eating them very often, but you know, I'm sausage over bacon when it comes to those things, and I got a choice now. So a couple of years, it should be in price parity, hopefully, or maybe even sooner. Very happy with them. Very happy. I would say more happy than I even am with the burgers. I'm very pleased to announce that we've reached 30,000 TikTok followers. So if you're from TikTok and you're listening to the podcast for the first or second time, hello, thank you for coming.
That's fantastic. But also, what's TikTok again?
I don't know. It's something for the kids, except middle-aged people are following us. I got a statistical breakdown. I was lamenting to Brian once that it seemed when I was looking at the list of TikTok followers coming in at the rate of once per second sometimes. Mm-hmm. They're not now, but TikTok ebbs and flows, and when it flows, it flows. Yeah, they were almost, I figured it was less than 1% women. But it turns out it's 9% women. So I blame you for not being sexier. I don't know. I want to blame someone.
I try. I do my best.
Yeah. I hope people come over and check out the podcast. And remember to follow the podcast, which we used to call subscribe in the podcasting world, although it's free, so that you keep getting new episodes delivered to you. And the province of British Columbia in Canada is announcing a one-time $110 payment to drivers for gas vehicle price relief. Yeah, and guess what? EV drivers are getting it. Ha ha ha. They're laughing all the way to the lottery store.
That's fantastic. And BC, I will add, has some of the cheapest electricity prices in Canada, some of the cheapest in the world. It's often just around 6 cents per kilowatt hour, 6 cents Canadian, which is, that's a super bargain. So that's great. Yeah, so Volkswagen and Apple both have low carbon manufacturing announcements. So the first is the Volkswagen Group. They've signed an agreement with Salzgitter AG, a memorandum of understanding on the supply of low carbon steel from the end of 2025. So they're not saying zero carbon steel, but very low carbon steel for Volkswagen, so that they can, start making cars that have fewer embodied emissions. So that's fantastic. And then a similar announcement from Apple about their MacBook Pro. So, you know, Apple's notebook computers, they use a lot of aluminum. And so they have begun to use carbon-free aluminum in their 16-inch MacBook Pros. And this is going to eventually, move out to the rest of the Apple line. So so carbon-free aluminum, carbon-free steel or low-carbon steel. This is just, one of the many ways that these corporations are going to reduce their overall carbon footprints, which is fantastic.
Are the cases made of aluminum as well as the interior components? I know a lot of the cooling has aluminum in it.
Yeah, it's mainly the cases, but the cases make up some part of the internal structure is part of that aluminum case.
Do you know how they are getting the carbon-free or low-carbon aluminum? Where is that coming from?
So it says that Apple helped fund the development of a manufacturing technology that makes all this happen. So it says here, this is from 9to5 Mac website. Apple is purchasing direct carbon-free aluminum following a major advancement in smelting technology to reduce emissions. So the aluminum is first manufactured at an industrial scale without creating any direct carbon emissions during the smelting process. And this was Apple helped spur this revolutionary announcement. And it was a partnership with Alcoa, Rio Tinto, and the governments of Canada and Quebec. That this all started in 2018. And then the following year, they purchased their first batch of this. So, I don't have any more detail on exactly how they achieve it. But, this has been a long time coming.
Okay. Well, Brian, my doctor gave me permission to get angry again.
Uh-oh.
So I've got clearance. I went and saw her last week, and the old ticker's working again, and my medication is working fine. The blood pressure is monitored.
Well, what are those pills? You put one of those pills under your tongue if you're having a heart attack?
Oh, my dad used to have those. What were they? Not iodine.
But like sulfur or something? Or
nitroglycerine.
Yeah.
But they were tiny little pills when you had chest pains. I haven't had chest pains in my life yet. I'll have one when I die, I'm sure. A big one. But the province we live in, Saskatchewan, Alberta, Ontario, New Brunswick, Canada, all provinces with right-wing governments and very little hydro, dependence on things that are not things, Quebec and BC have more lefty governments, but they happen to also have a lot of hydro too. So the big stink here is like, why do they keep making announcements? They made another announcement that they're working together on small modular nuclear reactors, sort of an agreement that they're going to do something in the next decade between 2034 and 2042. They're going to have an initial report done, and it will be built in Ontario, with 4 to follow in Saskatchewan between 2034 and 42. So yeah, I'm a little, I don't get this. We talked about this on the show, and I know that people listening to us are, hey, small modular nuclear, or just nuclear period. Like my son's pro-nuclear. I was arguing with him last night about it. Every day he's like pro-nuclear. I say it doesn't make sense financially. And he says, yeah, nuclear. So,
I mean, that is a pretty compelling argument.
That is a pretty compelling argument. Yes. But yeah, $5 billion is what they want to spend on this. They figure, and it'll power 300,000 homes. So I looked at the biggest solar farm that there is in Canada that is being built now. It powers about half that many homes for about $700 million. So you're looking right in today's prices about $1.4 billion to have an equivalent solar farm that would power the same maximum output as the nuclear plant. But for base load, you'd maybe need 2 or 3 times that, say at least 3 times that.
Yeah, and perhaps some batteries.
And some batteries and wind would be nice too, to mix it up, to have the ideal mix. But you could do it, and you could do it in a fairly cost-effective way today. I mean, the batteries would have to come later because they're going to be slower to deploy and they're more expensive now and they need to come down. But when they make these things, Brian, when they come online, solar will be half as much. Wind will be less. Batteries could be a third, in my estimation, conservatively, because of the constant incremental improvements in batteries, as well as price declining around 20% a year. Not for the next couple of years, by the way, due to shortages, but it's generally that's what happens. So I tweeted this out, and I know that everybody who's in the nuclear camp, they're entrenched in it, and they're, this is the thing, we need this. They don't really understand the economics of it. They don't know that nuclear hasn't been built, except for Georgia, which is a nightmare that we talked about last week. So yeah, okay. It's 2035. We're here in Saskatchewan. We're going to have 50% renewable energy by 2030. They're still sticking by that. 2035, let's call it 55% of our annual energy over the whole year is renewables, okay? Imagine that with me. Now, it's a Saturday in May, and it's sunny and windy, which is almost every Saturday in May where we live. And it just so happens that everything is producing nearly 100% of the electricity we need that day from solar, wind, hydro during the afternoon, and a little bit of battery storage, right? It happens in England even to this day, like now, right now, this year. It happens in different jurisdictions that have wind and solar on a weekend that you will produce 100%. So your levelized cost of electricity from the nuclear plant goes up because you're not using it. You're turning it off. You're saying, we don't need that. We're going to take this free electricity from our renewables. And then therefore the price per unit of electricity from that plant goes up. Now they will advertise these things as, okay, it's going to last for X number of years. And we're not going to talk about the insurance cap because we're going to have to pay for the insurance out of pocket. Taxpayers going to have to pay for that. And the cleanup, which is going to take 100 years and millions of dollars afterwards. But the cost of each unit of electricity goes up. It goes up when you're not using it. This is something that Rethink X pointed out. And a lot of people never talk about this aspect of it. Mm-hmm. The fact that renewables will outcompete this and you'll turn it off, and it will, or if you're a free market in the States, the United States, you're going to be buying power from this source and this source, you're going to be buying the cheapest power. Are you going to be buying from small modular nuclear or nuclear? You are not at those times. Therefore, you have to run these things at 90% of capacity or 100% of capacity, whatever you decide that it's going to do. That's what you set your price of electricity on. And when you're not, it goes up. So this is just a little example of a nice sunny afternoon who's a little bit of wind in May in Saskatchewan.
You're not wrong. How is your blood pressure? Are you having chest pains?
No chest pains yet. I haven't seen double or anything like that.
Okay, well, if you have chest pains, amyl nitrate, that's the pill that you need.
Is that what it is? Nitrate
so.
pills. Okay. I hope that the show grows enough, Brian, that I can have a nurse on hand at all times.
We should totally have a nurse. Yeah.
If we do run the 2030, I think we definitely might both need nurses. Anyway, I'm going to talk about that some more in future episodes. The levelized cost of electricity when you're competing with renewables. It's a lie. They're not talking about this stuff. Look it up, and rethinkx.org is a good place to start.
And it's a pretty good stall tactic if you want to just keep the status quo and you don't want to invest in renewables right now. All right, so Shell Oil has begun leasing Tesla cars in Germany. So apparently this is something that they have already started doing for other electric vehicle brands. So this is something I know that it's always a bit of a source of contention. It's like, do we applaud Shell for moving into an electric space and shifting their business to something cleaner, like renting out or leasing out electric cars? Or is it, just part of their strategy to continue to be evil? I don't know. But anyway, an interesting development. This is in Germany, and a Tesla Model 3 Standard Range Plus. You can rent that on subscription for about 600 euros a month.
So Shell is buying the cars and renting them out? I don't understand. What's their game?
I mean, it's I guess their way of diversifying their business beyond, what they normally do.
Oil companies don't rent cars. That's not something you do. I don't understand how that. I smell evil.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could argue that mobility is part of their business,
but they're not even selling the electricity. They're not even selling. In the case of Tesla, they're not selling the electricity.
Well, they probably do have Shell charging stations, so maybe it comes with like a charging package from Shell. So maybe they're making money off that, or that's included in the price.
Well, I would like to know that detail. That's a detail I'd like to know because I'm suspicious.
You're suspicious of Shell Oil?
Yes, I used to work for them.
Oh, that's right, you did, and you got fired, right? I mean, you got fired from all your jobs.
For good reason. I won't get into why, because that'll be an admission of guilt. But yes, they had a large book on bad things I did. And Brian, when it comes to endangering lives as a 21-year-old, I don't see why that's a problem. It's just a minimum wage job. I will say that we did put firecrackers in, jawbreaker candies.
At the Shell?
Yeah. In the store. It was the second busiest food store in Western Canada. And one of the guys was drilling holes in jawbreakers and putting firecrackers inside.
And then selling them or just setting them off?
Setting them off because they were so bored. It was so busy for a couple of hours a night that it was nonstop and it was crazy. And there was a line of people and all of a sudden it was dead. And these guys, these dropout people I was working with, would do crazy things. And I have no admission to participating in it. But when I was fired, it was pointed out that firecrackers and gas stations don't go together.
Imagine that.
I actually organized a union and testified in court as well for that Shell in my short time there. I always leave a mark, Brian. Always
was
leave
the
a
union
mark.
drive successful?
No, but it was damn near.
Ah.
And that's why I went to court. They one person who voted. And by the way, I participated in their anti-union message, which was a pizza party at 10 a.m. on a Sunday morning, where this really not very smart manager of the store was taken away to Shell Corporate and educated up and down to do this educational presentation with slides and things to show us why unions were bad. And all these kids who were, high school dropouts and had, sports car loans that they were paying off. Yeah, and it's a long story, but yeah, I worked for a union once, the UFCW. Hello to my brothers in UFCW if you're out there. Black sedans would pull by me as I walked down the street and say, "Get in, we're going out for steak at midnight on a Saturday," We'd have meetings.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. It was very, I think I just watched The Godfather, so it all just seems so colorful. Brian, Joe Manchin is a politician in the States. He's a U.S. Senator, and I hate his guts. And I'll tell you why. It's because he's ruining everything. He's actually a Democrat who's ruining everything on the climate. It's been suspected that he's in the back pocket of fossil fuels because he actually owns a fossil fuel company and lives on a boat, and he's a weasel. Yeah. The New York Times just did a deep dive into him and his terrible effect on climate. It's a big, big piece. What they've concluded is that through the vagaries of electoral politics, he is now the single most important figure shaping the United States' energy and climate policy. And with a base pay, this SOB of $6,500 a long time ago, when he started out, he was like a state politician, part-time, and his family's carpet business was struggling. He got into this and started helping coal companies who wanted to sell this crappy coal. It's not the good coal, it's the bad coal. It's the unenergy dense coal that has clay in it, and it's the worst coal for the climate that you can imagine. So the opportunity arrived for him in the form of two developers who wanted to build a power plant, and he started helping them. His grandfather went to work in the coal mines at age 9, and his uncle died in a mining accident. But he helped these developers clear bureaucratic hurdles, and that's how he got into this racket. And then he did something beyond routine constituent services. He went into business with a power plant who, guess what, buys the coal from these scummy people. And he supplied a type of low-grade coal mixed with rock and clay known as gob. Gob. And that is typically cast aside as junk by mining companies, but can be burned to produce electricity. And in addition, he arranged to receive a slice of the revenue from the electricity generated by the plant. And electricity bills that were paid by his constituents went right into his pocket, and then they went to the polls and elected him year after year, because that is what people do. The mice elect the cats all the time. Manchin used his political influence to urge a state official to approve the plant's air pollution permit. Nice. See, this guy's Satan. Him and Satan would get along just fine. He pushed fellow lawmakers to support a tax credit that helped the plant and worked behind the scenes to facilitate a rate increase that drove up revenue for the plant. Again, it's his constituents who just, okay, he seems like a good guy. We'll keep voting for you and giving you our money. And I don't think they're reading the New York Times there in Virginia. And electricity costs went up and raided to Joe's pocket. And he sat on committees, where businesses connected to the plant were lobbied as he was in the Senate. And a pivotal vote in an evenly split Senate, Manchin has blocked legislation that would speed the country's transition to wind, solar, and other clean energy away from coal, oil, and gas, but the burning of which is dangerously heating the planet, and he is just enabling them, Brian.
Yeah, and because the Senate is pretty much 50-50 Democrats and Republicans, these votes are, always super tight. And so, unfortunately, if there were just a few more Democrats, we wouldn't have this issue.
Yeah, but they have to throw him a bone. I mean, it's kind of a miracle that the Democrats even have a split vote there,
Yeah, and here in Canada, with our parliamentary system, everybody tends to vote along party lines, which is not so common in the U.S. But here it's very rare for somebody to vote a different way from their party.
So as this power plant, Brian, continues to burn coal and pay dividends to Manchin, it has harmed West Virginians economically, cost them hundreds of millions of dollars in excess electricity fees, all because of Joe, who they keep voting for. It drives me crazy when this stuff happens. It's one thing to be in the back pocket of industry, but when you're personally screwing your constituents and they keep voting for you, It's just, It's
Well, he has no incentive to change if they keep voting for him.
Sure. The gob type of coal he owns is less efficient power than the regular coal. So, yeah. They concluded there at the Times with their piece that at every level, Manchin's political career, from lawmaker in the state to U.S. senator, his official actions have benefited his financial interest in the Granttown power plant, blurring the line between public business and private gain. And by the way, GOB is an acronym for garbage of bituminous.
Is that?
I've read that right.
You didn't just
it's a
make
waste
that up?
coal. Garbage of bituminous. I can't say that when I'm sober. How would I say that when I was drunk?
Okay, so somewhat recently on the podcast, we talked about Washington State in our segment called Oil Ban and how they were moving to have the quickest phase out of internal combustion cars. So I just wanted to bring an update because they now have officially voted for it. Everything has officially passed. It hadn't quite at the last time we talked about this. So it has been completely and totally approved in Washington State, so no more internal combustion cars after 2030.
Now, in Canada today, they released a plan for 20% EVs by 2026. So we're at about 5.6% right now. They want to get it to 20% by 2026. I think it's 100% by, like 60% by 2030 and 100% by 2035. At least they're realistic about it. Once you hit 60%, then it goes over the scale tips and you're all on, it's 100%. I would give Canada an extra 5 years generously compared to other people, I think, because of, your experiences and some of the cold weather and the distance involved. And the fact that we all drive trucks in the country and in some places. So I would like to see it by 2030, and I certainly think it can be done by 2030. And these things can always be updated. At least what's important now, Brian, is getting things rolling now. Everything we do now is important.
Yeah, and of course, there's been lots more announcements of like battery factories and stuff. But yeah, will there be the supply? As all so many countries create these rules, will the actual production of these cars speed up fast enough to actually fulfill everybody's mandates? I don't know.
We are willing to learn.
What James learned.
It's time for What James Learned. And this week, Brian, I learned that taking a train from Toronto, Canada to Vancouver, Canada, which is a very long way. It's even longer than by car because you're planning a Toronto trip by car. This is a huge trip, 4 days by train.
And I will say I have done that flight before in a plane, and it's over 5 hours. So when you have
that's a big one.
An over 5 hour flight, that is a huge distance.
That is essentially LA to New York, the red eye. It's essentially that distance, even though Toronto's not on the coast. It's almost where New York is.
Yeah, pretty similar.
So I was startled to read that the Toronto to Vancouver on a train, one person causes more emissions than one person flying that route. Now, this is true for a number of train routes in the world, not the majority of them, but there's a number of major ones that it's shockingly worse emissions to take a train than flying. And that's one of the routes. Now, the Toronto to Vancouver route goes to Winnipeg, then it goes north through Saskatoon. Again, Saskatoon gets mentioned more on this show than it really deserves to. And then up to Edmonton, which is a bit north, and then it comes through the Rocky Mountains back down to Vancouver. So it jots up north and comes back down. It's not entirely just east-west. Another problem, as we always have in Canada, is that the trains aren't full. Because we're a smaller country. We've got a ninth of the population of the United States and the same sort of vastness spread out. So that is always a problem for us. And I guess adding a snack car to the train and I want a snack car for my backyard. It's a car just for snacks, Brian. Think about that. I like that. That's where I'd hang out. But adding that car to the train adds 15% to your personal emissions on a train. And sometimes the snack car's there.
Wow.
Sometimes the snack car is there. Sometimes it's not. I prefer it to be there. But that's 50% more emissions just for that snack car. Now, they say that double-decker trains are better because you can put twice the people in the same car. And I noticed that I've been watching some videos on Amtrak in the States. People just make videos of what it's like to take the train certain routes. I kind of think that's kind of cool. So I've gone down that rabbit hole a couple of times just watching people. Apparently the food's very good on trains. I'm surprised by that. It's gone down during COVID, but generally speaking, there's very good food on trains, unlike a plane. Something to keep in mind.
And the only thing that surprises me about the Canadian routes, and it also tends to be quite expensive to buy a ticket, but the only thing we have going for us, because we do have a vast kind of underpopulated country, but most of the country is kind of in a straight line. Like one rail route covers probably 90% of the population of the country. So I have always kind of wondered why it didn't work better and nobody takes the train. Whereas, in the U.S. they have more population, but they have to fulfill, way more routes with their train service.
I noticed that some of the U.S. train routes are faster. Like the trains are getting faster. They're getting higher speed trains. They're not, what we would normally call high speed trains, but they're higher than normal. Yeah. So that, and they're more comfortable. And, it always amazes me when we go down from Saskatchewan into North Dakota or Montana that there's trains down there. Like I could go, you and I went down to a film festival in Fargo a few years ago, but if you stopped in Minot, you could get on a train in North Dakota, in a small, tiny city in the middle of, you think we're sparse? Yeah. North Dakota, Montana is extremely sparse. You get on a train, you can go to Chicago and have a gay old time.
No, we have some friends who did that. That was like a family vacation. They drove down to Minot and then took the train to Chicago. It's amazing.
Well, it's one of those, I'm getting kind of long in the tooth now for doing something adventurous like that, but it seems like, kind of a fun idea. And I'm just amazed that they can do that because, like you say, all of our population is located down by the U.S. border and in a kind of a straight line, and we should be able to do that. But they're doing it. I don't know how much money they're losing, but and then you could take a train anywhere. You could go to Los Angeles. You could go to Houston. You could go to Florida. There's a way to do it. It's amazing. I'm just baffled by that. I don't know anything about the subsidies or anything like that. Anyway, Brian, it going from Toronto to Vancouver generates this is a large variety here, about 224 to 4,200 kilograms of carbon per person. That's a wide variety. And I guess it depends on how populated the train is, how many people are on board, and how many are in double-decker cars, and how many are in first class. And if that damn snack car is attached. But if flying only has 600 kilograms, so that's less than the minimum of the train rather, and a fraction of the worst case scenario for the train. It's actually, a huge difference. It's not just, by a smidgen. It's a fraction of it. So I'm shocked by that. I would have thunk taking the train's the way to go. I mean, the Green Party leader, Elizabeth May, used to take the train all the time. Yeah. And maybe she didn't need to do that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully an EV is better. I'm going to make an EV road trip to Toronto. But my one story about taking the plane from Toronto to Vancouver, I was lucky enough to get bumped up to first class on that flight. Yeah. And that's when you want to get bumped up, when it's an over 5-hour flight. It was fantastic. And the flight ended with fresh baked chocolate cookies with ice cream.
Yeah, I've been there once. Once. When I did Just for Laughs in Montreal TV show. And I thought I need to keep doing this. It didn't work out, Brian.
It's the best.
It did not work out. But at least I had a taste. Maybe it's better not to have a taste because, once you see what you're missing. Yeah. So other researchers found that traveling to Vancouver from Toronto, even by combustion car, was about the same as rail and plane. So there wasn't, this is a different set of research, and they found that it was all about the same. So I guess flying is, I mean, that's 4 days on a bumpy train, right? It's fantastic when you're going through the Rocky Mountains during daylight hours. That's the price of admission right there.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun.
Hey, there's electric passenger rail in Europe and Japan. That's a different story, obviously. When you can power that.
We could certainly switch some of these train services to electric, so hopefully that'll come soon.
And we have been talking about the advent of battery electric trains, the locomotives that have batteries in them. I keep seeing stories every week about new sales of those. So I think that's a thing. And it's time for the lightning round.
The Clean Energy Show Lightning Round.
Brian, it's time for the Clean Energy Show Lightning Round. I have an interesting one for you this week. This past Saturday in California, I noticed that somebody had posted the breakdown of all their different power generation. And this was a Saturday, again, like we were talking about in our own example here. It was 9% wind, some hydro in there, about 7%, and geothermal was 4%. I thought that was a fairly high number for geothermal in California. I didn't know it was that high because that's got to be one of the higher places in North America then.
Yeah, I'm surprised because, as we've said before, we just got our first one in Canada very near us. So good for California to already be at 4%. That's amazing.
And 2/3 of that was solar, and only 9% was wind, so it must have been a nice day, and only 0.5% of that or so was batteries. But so it was 88.3% renewable, wind, solar, all that stuff. You know, that's the kind of day I'm talking about in my 2035 scenario right there in California this past Saturday. So two things about that were interesting. The total mix, the fact that it can happen, and the fact that geothermal was that high. I'd like to see geothermal, but it's one of the more expensive technologies, you know. It's not there's a risk to it too. Like you could set up a 2-year pilot project on a site and find out that it's not going to work out for you, that the water's not hot enough. So the court orders Tesla to buy back a car from a customer who felt autopilot was like a drunk first-time driver. Do you have any empathy for this man, Brian?
No, it doesn't make any sense at all.
You don't think that he was disappointed in his autopilot? And that's not even full self-driving. It's just
that's
autopilot.
not even full self-driving. Those are just the,
But the
which are
court
very
sided
similar
with them.
to automated driving features in other cars.
The court sided with them, so I thought that was interesting. London has announced that it is providing funding to deploy a fleet of Tesla Model 3 vehicles through a vehicle subscription service to be available for private hire drivers such as Uber. So the city is buying the Teslas and kind of like Shell, I guess, but
Yeah.
they're letting people use these for Uber, so that's their way of getting these drive services decarbonized, I guess. What do you think of that?
No, that's nice. And I guess, you know, a city like London has pretty deep pockets. So, you know, but financing all these things isn't cheap. So, you know, put your money where your mouth is. And if London wants cleaner air, boom, they're doing it.
I've read, I'm on all these Chevy Bolt forums, and I remember somebody saying that they bought a Bolt. I don't know if I mentioned this last week, for Walmart deliveries on Saturdays. And the wife of this person bought one too for Uber, and they both do it on the side, and they bought the Bolts just for that. And I guess they're getting more money now because of high gas prices.
Oh,
so
for sure.
they're pocketing more of it. Well, most people are in these gig economy driving are suffering from the gas prices quite badly.
Yeah, please tip your Uber drivers, your Uber Eats drivers, your Skip the Dishes drivers. Please tip them a lot.
Do you use food delivery services?
Yeah, occasionally, yeah.
Which one do you use?
Skip the Dishes, but recently DoorDash as well.
How come? What's the difference?
It's basically the same, and I think often the same people work for both services. They're, you know, independent contractors, so, you know, probably the same drivers work for both sometimes.
My nephew is a programmer for Skip the Dishes in Winnipeg. Didn't it start here?
It started here in Saskatchewan, yeah.
So you think we're Saskatchewan? Nothing good can come out of Saskatchewan, but
except this podcast.
Meal delivery and this podcast. Thank you very much.
That's it.
And Medicare and a few other things.
Yeah, universal health care. Those are our three things.
So taking matters into their own hands, Tesla is planning a big megapack project at their Gigafactory in Texas. Why? To avoid the Texas blackouts that come with their crappy grid. So they're building their own battery pack. That's a good idea.
No, that makes sense. And of course, they're putting solar on the roof. I think they have solar on the roof of all of their factories. There was another CBC story recently, too, about Texas. And the headline on this CBC story is, once the epicenter of the oil patch, Texas now humming with wind and solar. So wind power in Texas now accounts for 21% of the state's electricity production.
Now, I remember 10 years ago reading about this oil tycoon. I don't know if he's still alive. He was pretty old. He was putting all of his money in the wind in Texas, and he was making money off of it, and I'm sure it's worked out well for him.
Paul Thomas Anderson should make a sequel to There Will Be Blood.
That's a good idea.
About that guy and wind turbines.
Just don't cast Will Smith. Green Car Reports cited a study that shows 46% of GOP voters in the United States support government investment in chargers for electric cars. I thought that was nice, that nearly half of GOP voters, considering the rhetoric down there in the United States around false information and, Facebook education.
It is one of those cases where, the public is getting on board both left and right, slowly.
And GOP voters also had a very positive view of EVs helping the environment, health, economy, and vehicle safety, although, of course, it was much higher with other parties. From Inside EVs, Hubject, the developer of an e-roaming platform that allows drivers to use charging stations from different networks in Europe, has published an independent protocol to stabilize a developing plug-and-charge ecosystem like what Tesla has. So when Brian goes to charge his car at a supercharger, all he has to do is plug it in, and his Tesla app knows that it's his car and will bill him accordingly. He doesn't have to do anything else. No punching numbers, no dialing phone numbers, no getting the credit card out. That doesn't work.
No, it's super simple. I've never really had a problem. I have had a problem sometimes where it doesn't want to let go and you can't unplug it. So there's an emergency.
That's a problem?
Yeah, but there's a little release inside you.
Oh, there's an emergency release inside. Okay.
But the other thing I was going to mention is that we talked last week or the week before about they've tweaked their navigation algorithm to more accurately reflect weather conditions and wind and air pressure and stuff like that. And I did notice a change on this trip. It did seem more accurate, the prediction, the car's prediction of how much energy it would use.
Cool. That's nice to hear. So this thing is open source, and they're hoping that it'll be widely adopted. I really like that. And I've called recently because we've had so much trouble with third-party chargers that Tesla should just take over the charging space. We should just give them all of our money and say, go make a charging network for everyone. And Elon has asked the federal government to do just that. Just give us the money and we'll build some chargers.
But also too, these things are all connected to the internet. So yeah, this Hubject or somebody else can get all these things to talk to each other and make it work properly, for God's sakes.
Absolutely. And finally this week, Brian, heat wave temperature thresholds have been raised in England by the Met Office. So when they declare a heat wave now, it's going to be hotter than it used to be. That's adopting to climate change, just moving the goalposts.
It's like, how sizes have slowly, small, medium, and large clothing sizes have slowly gotten bigger over the years.
Yes, I'm in a small right now. New limits are bumped up by about 1 degree Celsius. So the new limits now for a heat wave in the United Kingdom, and this is kind of laughably low to begin with, are 28 degrees Celsius in Surrey, Berkshire, and a few other places, 27 degrees Celsius in Lincolnshire, and 26 Celsius in the East Riding of Yorkshire.
Yeah, and we see things like this with, weather warnings in Canada because we have this vast country with different climates in different part of the country. So, yeah, like it in Vancouver, they'll issue, some kind of severe cold warning when it gets, slightly below zero. But for us here, it's got to be, at least minus 35 before anyone gets too concerned about the temperature.
All right. Well, that's our time. That's all we have this week for you, and we hope to talk to you soon. Contact us at the Clean Energy Show, cleanenergyshow@gmail.com. Good way to get a hold of us. We're on TikTok and Twitter. Our handle there is Clean Energy Pod. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel where you can see my video on trains before it gets to the TikTok people. That's the advantage that you have. Leave us a voicemail at speakpipe.com/Clean Energy Show. And thanks to everyone again who came over from TikTok. Remember to subscribe and follow the podcast. And I hope to see you again next week.
See you next week.